morning. You're watching NTD TV's special live coverage of the July 20th Falun Gong Rally for Freedom in Washington, D.C. The rally is held annually in America's capital, Washington, D.C., on or around the same day, July 20th, each year, and has been since 1999. The reason for all of this that you are seeing here right now, to call for an end to the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China. What you were just watching is the live press conferences that are happening right now on Capitol Hill. Good morning, I am Dane Chen. On this day in 1999, millions of Chinese people in China became the target of a brutal persecution campaign that continues to be carried out today. Throughout the next 2.5 hours, we will bring you live speeches by members of Congress, human rights organizations, and various government entities. Following the speeches, we will take you live to a parade, joined by more than 1,000 people from around the globe. What you are seeing now are the many men and women who have gathered on the west lawn of the U.S. Capitol. They are practitioners of a peaceful spiritual practice called Falun Gong. And if they were to do this in China today, they would be arrested, taken to labor camps, and tortured until they renounce their spiritual beliefs. Before we take you to our first speaker, Alan Adler, let's play a short video about the significance of this day, July 20th.
July 20th. In 1998, the Chinese government estimated that between 70 and 100 million people in China were practicing Falun Gong. It was the most popular practice of its kind in Chinese history, but the leader of the Chinese Communist Party wanted it gone. In the early hours of July 20, 1999, public security bureaus carried out an organized operation to arrest the volunteer coordinators of Falun Gong practice sites throughout China. This was ordered by then-Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. He declared that Falun Gong should be eliminated within 3 months. When his campaign failed to stop Falun Gong, he simply cracked down harder. Jiang Zemin implemented a strategy to eradicate Falun Gong practitioners by ruining their reputations, crushing them financially, and eliminating them physically. He also declared that beating them to death counts as suicide. From 1999 to present, the Falun Gong website minghui.org has verified at least 4,000 cases of Falun Gong practitioners being persecuted to death, but some estimates suggest the true number of practitioners killed is actually several 100,000. In response to 18 years of brutal repression, Falun Gong practitioners inside and outside China have been unyielding in their efforts to expose the persecution through peaceful activities. The Falun Gong Rally for Freedom in Washington, D.C.
And I have here with me once again my guest, Zenon Dolnicki. Thank you for being here with us, Zenon.
My pleasure.
And if you guys are just joining us, what you are seeing is the July 20th Falun Gong Rally for Freedom that is happening right now, live in Washington, D.C. Throughout the next 2.5 hours, we're going to bring you speeches from members of Congress, various human rights organization leaders. And Zenon, you have been a practitioner of Falun Dafa for 20 years. So Zenon and I will be commenting on what you see here today. And Zenon, I want to ask you, what is Falun Gong for those of you who do not know at home?
Sure. Falun Gong is a spiritual practice, but it also has exercises and meditation. So the exercises look like a very simple Tai Chi, and there's also a meditation component to it. And it teaches one to follow truth, compassion, and tolerance as the essential to the spiritual teachings to help us harmonize and uplift our bodies and become in harmony with the universe.
Now, what you're telling me is that Falun Gong is a spiritual discipline. It's peaceful. It's rooted in meditation and traditional Chinese beliefs. And here we are watching people essentially protest to call for an end of a persecution that is happening in China for the last 18 years. So these are sort of the questions and topics that we will be talking about in the next 2.5 hours. And so our first speaker that is getting ready is Chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, Dr. Daniel Mark, and he is making his way to the podium at the moment. But first, actually, we'd like to play a short video about what you were just talking about, Falun Gong. What is Falun Gong? Let's take a look at that video.
This is Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong. It's a spiritual practice based on a tradition that dates back more than 1,000 years. It was once passed down only from teacher to disciple. In 1992, Mr. Li Hongzhi made Falun Gong public and began teaching it across China. Falun Gong is a type of Qigong, a class of gentle exercises and meditation designed to improve mind and body. Other Qigong systems like Tai Chi are also popular in China. But unlike most Qigong taught in China today, Falun Gong emphasizes spiritual improvement. Its core principles are truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, or 真善人 in Chinese. Falun Gong practitioners study its teachings through published texts, especially the book Zhuan Falun. They aim to elevate their moral standards while supplementing their practice with 5 sets of physical exercises. 9-day Falun Gong workshops are offered in cities around the world. The workshops introduce the main text and teach the exercises. Falun Gong workshops are always free of charge. Since its introduction 25 years ago, Falun Gong has spread to tens of millions of people in 114 countries and regions. The Falun Gong Rally for Freedom in Washington, D.C.
And now we will go live to Dr. Daniel Mark, who is speaking at Capitol Hill.
Nations, the State Department has agreed with us. A CPC designation means that that country, China, is one of the worst violators of religious freedom in the world. Our CPC recommendation is based on many facts which you all know better than I. Falun Gong practitioners are routinely detained, and too many are never heard from again. Although the re-education through labor system was supposedly stopped in 2014, we know that there are many other ways for the Chinese government to illegally detain Falun Gong practitioners. When they are detained, Falun Gong adherents are tortured in attempts to get them to renounce their faith. And of course, the unspeakable practice of harvesting organs from Falun Gong prisoners continues. China is truly one of the worst violators of religious freedom in the world today. So what we need now from our government here in the US is not just words, not just a CPC designation, but also action. We need the President, the State Department, and Congress to act pursuant to that designation and send a clear message to China that the U.S. will not tolerate the persecution of the Falun Gong or anyone else. We at USURF know that the World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of the Falun Gong has compiled a list of more than 76,000 perpetrators of abuses against Falun Gong practitioners. Many of these Chinese government officials or are affiliated with the government. I know you are all here to make sure that Congress hears your voice loud and clear, and you should do so confidently. Congress understands your plight and supports your cause. We must thank them for what they have done and ask them to do more. Thanks to Congress, we have new tools to go after people who commit the kinds of abuses that the Falun Gong have suffered in China. For example, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act empowers the U.S. government to target individuals, target individual officials, not just whole governments who abuse religious freedom. We want to make it harder for people to hide the persecution, and we want there to be a price paid for their abuses. Please continue your fight, and please keep USURF informed of what you learn and of your activities. We rely on good people such as you to help us stay fully informed about religious freedom abuses and religious prisoners of conscience around the world. USURF stands with you in your quest for the freedom to practice your beliefs in China and anywhere else. I pray that God will continue to bless you and us together in this important work. Thank you very much.
And that was Dr. Daniel Mark, who is the chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is an independent bipartisan U.S. federal government commission created by the 1998 International Religious Freedom Act that monitors the universal right to freedom of religion or belief abroad. Now, at this time, we'd like to take you live to Congressman Dana Rohrabacher's speech. Let's go there.
By being here today, is involved in a very historic mission. That mission is not just to push through those ideas of benevolence and tolerance that the Falun Gong believes, but your mission is to make sure that the people of this world remain at peace. The fact is that the attitudes and the values of those people who now control the mainland of China will bring us to war if we let the situation get out of hand and continue in the direction that it is. The Chinese communists now are very clear that they are not communist in the sense of the philosophical word, but they are a clique of gangsters who control this large area with a country with the largest number of people in the world. If those gangsters who run that country continue to do so and continue their aggressive repression of their own people while demonstrating foreign policy-wise these types of aggressive acts as we've seen in the South China Sea, we will be at war. That would be one of the most terrible things that we could possibly imagine. Having people kill each other, people who don't know each other are killing each other. Thank God that we have voices like the Falun Gong in China and here, and we have people in this country who understand that respecting our rights of our people here and trying to seek peace throughout the world is a noble endeavor. And today, I thank all of you for being partners with the good people of the United States in this noble endeavor to save the world from evil forces. Thank you for doing your part. You're here to remind us that all the good people are a team in this world. It's disgraceful that many members of the American business community, in order to make a quick buck, and in fact, make even more millions than they already have, are willing to make deals with China, with a Chinese government that represses its people and threatens the world. No, we have coalitions of good people here, and you have coalitions of people, good people in China. The Falun Gong are bringing us together. God bless you for that. The good people of America stand with you. We will win this fight for humanity, and we will make it a better world based on those wonderful principles that the Falun Gong believes and every good and decent person in this planet believes. Thank you very much for letting me express my solidarity with you.
And that was Congressman Dana Rohrabacher's speech. Now, Congressman Dana Rohrabacher has been a longtime proponent of human rights, and especially speaking out against the atrocities that is going on in China right now about the persecution of Falun Gong. He's currently serving actually his 13th term in Congress, so he's been there for a long time, and he used some very powerful words calling what's been going on evil. You know, it's the true manifestation of evilness. That's what's going on. And also earlier, Dr. Daniel Mark was talking about organ harvesting, and we will definitely get to that later on in the program, and you will hear that throughout the speakers. They're drawing attention to a monumental report that came out basically talking about organ harvesting in China. And at this time, we'd like to bring you to Congressman Rothus from Pennsylvania, Keith Rothus. He's serving his third term. Here's Keith now.
Been a response by the international community in recent years, including the American government. Last year, the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Representatives unanimously passed H.Res. 343, expressing concern regarding persistent and credible reports of systemic state-sanctioned organ harvesting from non-consenting prisoners of conscience in the People's Republic of China, including from large numbers of Falun Gong practitioners and members of other religious and ethnic minority groups. Rates of voluntary organ donation in China remain severely depressed and are insufficient to supply the volume of organ transplant procedures performed. Investigators fear that living prisoners of conscience could be forcibly enrolled in an organ donation system due to the donation shortage. Throughout all of this persecution, I admire the Falun Gong for practicing nonviolence. It has grown increasingly clear that the Communist Party is unwilling to move toward reconciliation or dialogue. Falun Gong attracts practitioners from all over the world. The Falun Gong are heroes in the cause of human rights, and their story should captivate and inspire all those who love freedom. It is time for the human rights violations in China to stop. Respect for human life and freedom are universal aspirations which everyone should be able to enjoy, regardless of beliefs or practices. To the leaders of China, do not be afraid of your people. Do not be afraid of freedom. Do not be afraid to welcome children into this world. Members of Falun Dafa and Falun Gong, stay strong. Know that you have people in Congress who support you and the values you represent. God bless you, and thank you for having me here today.
And that was Keith Rothus of Pennsylvania. He's a congressman. Next up, we have Donald Payne. He is a representative for New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. Since taking office in 2012, Mr. Payne has spoken out against the persecution of Falun Gong in his speeches. Last year, he co-sponsored House Resolution 343 to condemn the forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong. Let's go to Mr. Payne right now.
We want to speak today about the ongoing attempt by the Chinese government to eliminate Falun Gong. Presently, China, there is injustice being perpetrated against those citizens who have and continue to practice Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a peaceful practice with a moral philosophy based on the virtues of truth, compassion, and forbearance. Chinese authorities have entered the public and private spaces, schools, households, villages, and businesses in order to transform Falun Gong practitioners through forced religious conversion. Efforts to force religious conversion have accumulated in the thousands of Falun Gong practitioners being held in prisons, detention centers, and forced labor camps under deplorable conditions simply for their beliefs. Those held captive are tortured and beaten multiple times a day, and many are sexually abused, resulting in damage to the body, the psyche, and the spirit of these victims. Not only that, but it is clear that organs for transplant are not only sourced from executed prisoners, but from Falun Gong followers who have been kept captive for an extended period of time by the Chinese authorities. Thousands have died as a result. The international community must express its outrage at the trafficking of organs in China and speak out against these clear human rights violations which go against the basic human right to religious conviction and bodily integrity. Every person has a right to practice any religion they choose. Government cannot dictate a person's beliefs and faith. When a government does so, it strikes at the core of human freedom. It is incomprehensible and unacceptable for people to be treated in such a cruel, inhumane, and degrading manner. Practitioners of Falun Gong deserve to practice their faith without harassment, imprisonment, or loss of life. We must continue to fight. Human rights for every citizen of China and citizens everywhere should be able to enjoy without fear of loss. You are standing up. You are making it known that the Falun Gong are a peaceful practitioner, and we want to support you here in the United States, because if we do not support your efforts, your rights as a practitioner of Falun Gong, then the United States does not stand for what they say they do, and that is human rights for everyone. Thank you so much. Let's continue the fight. Thank you.
And that was Donald Payne, Congressman from New Jersey. Next, we have Robert Herman, who is the Vice President of Freedom House. Founded in 1941, Freedom House is an independent watchdog organization dedicated to the expansion of freedom and democracy around the world. And we're going to wait for Robert Herman, to come up to the podium in just a moment. Let's recap a little bit about what we just heard. Each of these congressmen talked about organ harvesting, talked about how thousands of Falun Gong practitioners were put in prison. Actually, let's talk about that in just a moment. Right now, this is Robert Herman of Freedom House.
The worldwide struggle for democracy, human rights, rule of law, and human dignity commends the courageous practitioners of Falun Gong in China. We are inspired by the refusal to submit to the Chinese regime's brutal repression and relentless efforts to crush a powerful, non-violent social force seen as posing a significant threat to the authoritarian state's monopoly on political power and citizen loyalty. Religious liberty is in the American DNA. It is part of our heritage, our identity. Religious liberty is a pillar of our democratic system, and it is a universal right that all governments are obligated to uphold. Freedom House is committed to continue to expose the assault on freedom of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and religious belief, all of which are being systematically violated by the Chinese government, and doing so with impunity. We are committed to pushing and working with those in the international community, including those that are here today, to seek to hold the Chinese government to account for denying its citizens their fundamental rights. Those who practice Falun Gong in China have been actively persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party for more than 2 decades. Along with other religious minorities and government opposition, they have been illegally arrested, detained, imprisoned, tortured, forced into psychiatric hospitals, sent to labor camps without trials, and have died in prison under horrific conditions. All of these actions violate international norms and standards and simple human decency. Hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners have been imprisoned since 1999, and thousands are being held as prisoners of conscience at any given time. Security authorities can send any Chinese citizen to detention centers for years without trial, and Falun Gong practitioners have been especially targeted for these deprivations of their liberty. For Falun Gong practitioners, the abolition of the labor camp system has brought only limited relief, for the regime has introduced detention in so-called legal education centers that are for forced conversion. The 610 office, which was mentioned before, established in 1999 for the express purpose of coordinating the persecution of the Falun Gong. Freedom House research reveals that branches of the office continue to function throughout the country, engaging in extensive surveillance, widespread arrests, and propaganda campaigns that aim to vilify and dehumanize Falun Gong practitioners in the eyes of their fellow citizens. But the Falun Gong story in China is not just one of victims and survivors of horrible persecution. It is also a story of unshakable faith, of perseverance and resilience. We may also be saying the impact of practitioners' courage as new opportunities are emerging to push back against the government repression targeting Falun Gong. According to Freedom House research, after years of international advocacy and Falun Gong's adherents' own publication efforts inside China, there are a growing number of local security officials who are choosing to protect practitioners, detaining and then quickly releasing them or avoiding their arrest altogether. One human rights lawyer who has handled Falun Gong cases around the country told us, quote, "It feels like central policy has remained the same, always wanting to repress. But because Falun Gong practitioners have talked to local officials, some of them have changed their attitude and realized that Falun Gong members are not that threatening, so they won't arrest them. Orders for arrest continue to come down from the high level, but sometimes the public security agents will say no. They are only exercising to be healthy." U.S. diplomats and members of Congress, as well as those in civil society who have public platforms, must elevate the importance of the plight of Falun Gong in China. Human rights and democratic freedoms, including the treatment of Falun Gong and other persecuted groups, must be at the center of discussions with Chinese officials. These are core American values that should shape our interests in the world. America's long-standing bipartisan commitment to advancing human rights around the world must not be subordinate to other competing interests. Let me end where I started. We all should have enormous admiration for the staying power, the courage of China's Falun Gong adherents. Their struggle is the same struggle as activists and ordinary citizens around the world. They are determined to live in societies where they are free to think, to say, and believe what they want, and where government is accountable to its people. There should be no doubt that Falun Gong practitioners are changing China rather than the other way around. We stand in solidarity with the families of those in prison or those who have lost loved ones as a result of Chinese government's brutal suppression of basic human rights, including spiritual belief. I know that you join me in keeping faith that human freedom will prevail. Thank you.
And that was Robert Herman, Vice President of Freedom House, with some emphatic words. Now, Freedom House actually just published a very large, very comprehensive report called The Battle for China's Spirit. It was published February of 2017. It examines the evolution of the Communist Party's policies and religious control and the citizens' responses. And now we will take you to Faith McDonald, who is the Director for Religious Liberty Programs of Institute on Religion and Democracy. Let's go to Faith.
The Institute on Religion and Democracy continues to stand in solidarity with you in working for freedom for all of the Chinese people, and to pray that God will bless your efforts and bring freedom to China. Hanging from the bookshelf in my office, I have beautiful lotus blossoms. From each one dangles a small banner that lists Falun Dafa's 3 admirable principles: truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. You know what I mean, those little beautiful blossoms. I am therefore always reminded of you every day, and reminded to pray for you and for freedom in China. But in addition to truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, my experience with you over the past 12 years in which I have been privileged to speak at the annual rally have made me want to suggest 3 more principles for Falun Gong and for all of the Chinese people who stand up against oppression and persecution of the Chinese Communist Party. The first is courage. The courage of Falun Gong practitioners, of husbands and wives who resist the forced abortion and gendercide of baby girls, of democracy advocates, of Chinese Christians, the courage and ingenuity of those who have fought against the great firewall of China and provided internet freedom, not only to Chinese, but to Iranian freedom fighters and others, like the Tibetan and Uyghur activists. That courage is undeniable. The people of China courageously endure persecution, imprisonment, torture, and brutal death and organ harvesting in their freedom, their hunger for freedom. Where is the courage of the West, the courage of the U.S. government to stand in solidarity with these freedom fighters and acknowledge that you are our true allies? The second principle is resilience. There is a saying, I survived the fire because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me. That describes the brave and good Chinese people. They have survived the fire of communist oppression and brutality because the fire inside them, whether it be the hunger for freedom, the fire of God's Holy Spirit, or burning passion for what should be, burns brighter than the fire around them. Where's the fire in the West? You have it, you that come here to show your solidarity with your suffering brothers and sisters, but where is the passion of Western nations? Finally, the third principle that I connect to Falun Dafa and to all of the Chinese freedom fighters is inspiration. The people of China, Chinese Christian pastors and lay people suffering in prison and whose properties have been stolen or bulldozed, democracy activists arrested and tortured, people of Falun Gong wrenched from their families, are inspirational to those of us in the West who do not even realize how precious freedom is. At a time when delusional Westerners and corrupt media are promoting communist and socialist thinking. Thanks to the Tuidong movement, almost 3 million people have renounced the Chinese Communist Party. That is incredible. And of course, it has to do with the speaking of truth. Truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, courage, resilience, and inspiration. These are your guiding principles, and I'm honored to stand with you today. And we at the Institute on Religion and Democracy will do everything in our power to help wake the world to this horror of organ harvesting and the continuing persecution of Falun Gong and others who long for freedom. Thank you once again for allowing me to share this anniversary with you. May God bless you, and may God bless all the Chinese people.
And that was Faith McDonald, who spoke about the admirable principles of Falun Gong practitioners: truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and added 3 more qualities, that is courage, resilience, and inspiration. Next, we'll go to David Cleveland, who is a senior lawyer at the Catholic Charities of Washington. In 2004, Cleveland was named National Volunteer of the Year by Catholic Charities USA. Last year at this rally, Mr. Cleveland spoke about the disturbing differences between organ transplants in the United States compared to China. And now we will go to Mr. Cleveland.
He needs a liver transplant. He has B-positive blood. He's 5 foot 6 inches tall. He weighs 130 pounds. He's waiting. He needs a liver from someone with the same blood type and the same body size. If such a person dies, then we have 12 hours from the time of death to get his liver and transplant it into the body of Walter. The time period between death and a successful transplant is short. It is a matter of hours. There is another man, I will call him Mr. Smith. He has B-positive blood, same body size, and he has agreed upon his death to be a liver donor. Walter is waiting for Mr. Smith to die. Let's say Smith dies in a car crash in Memphis, Tennessee. The hospital there examines him, determines him to be dead, and that they discover this man is an organ donor. Maybe it says that on his driver's license. Then the hospital will examine his liver and see if it's healthy. The hospital will find out his blood type and his body size. The hospital will then discover we have a potential liver donor right here. Will the hospital telephone Walter and ask him if he can get to the Memphis hospital in 12 hours? The hospital might call Walter at 9 o'clock in the morning or maybe at midnight if his phone number is on a waiting list. Here in the United States, we have a waiting list for people who want livers. If you are too healthy, you can't get on that list. If you are too sick, you can't get on that list. Maybe Walter can get on that list, and after a struggle, he is now on it. Today in America, we have about 16,000 people on that waiting list. We do about 7,000 organ transplants every year. Every year, people die waiting. What's the story in China? The culture there is against donating organs. Almost nobody donates. A Red Cross worker in 2015 in one province said, "As of now, we have not had any donated hearts or livers, not one. However, there are hospitals who advertise, you want a liver transplant? Come to us. The average waiting time is 2 weeks. Another hospital advertised, our average waiting time is 1 week. A recent news report told of a man who entered a hospital on Wednesday, he paid cash, and he got a liver the next day. China has a living organ donor bank. They have a list of people with healthy livers. I repeat, they have a list of people with healthy livers. If you need a liver, tell the hospital, and they go get one. Millions of people are in prison in China. They don't get very much medical attention. At times, however, doctors come to the prisons and take blood samples only from one group of prisoners, Falun Gong practitioners. The prison wants to know the blood type of each Falun Gong prisoner. So when the hospital calls and says, we need a liver, B positive donor, the prison can get one quickly. Falun Gong practitioners are popular because they do not smoke, drink, or take drugs. They have a reputation for being healthy. They are healthy. They meditate and do exercises. What can we do about this? U.S. medical schools should stop training Chinese doctors in organ transplants. We should deny visas to government officials. We should shut off banking channels for them. We should ask the District of Columbia to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy as Falun Gong Plaza. Ask your city or state to pass a resolution. We condemn the government of China. We are horrified that you harvest livers from peaceful prisoners.
And that was David Cleveland. David had a very detailed account of how organs are donated in America versus how they are not as much donated in China, yet in China, hundreds of thousands of transplants are done each year. Next, we have Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who represents Florida's 27th district in Congress. She introduced House Resolution 343 to Congress, and we like to go to her speech at this moment.
Very much. What an honor and what a privilege to be here with all of you on such a worthy cause. And I look around these banners. Who could be against this except for the Chinese thugs? Stop crimes against humanity. Bring the Chinese dictator to justice. Falun Gong, the world needs truthfulness, compassion, tolerance against the violent suppression of 100 million people. Stop the illegal organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. These are all the issues that bind us together. And I especially love that banner about how many years of dictatorship and lies. Enough is enough. So thank you, friends of Falun Gong. Thank you for inviting me to be here today to join you in this quest for justice for Falun Gong practitioners. It is an honor for me to be here with you as we mark the 18th anniversary of China's shameful and tragic persecution of the Falun Gong. Here in front of our nation's Capitol Dome, we recognize China's horrific treatment of Falun Gong practitioners. We reaffirm our solidarity with the followers of this spiritual, peaceful people and recommit to stopping China's abuse. Last year, as you know, the House successfully passed House Resolution 343, which I was so proud to have sponsored, and I led with your tremendous support. This resolution was the first formal recognition by Congress of the plight of the Falun Gong practitioners, and we sent a loud and clear message to the thugs of China that we demand an immediate end to the persecution of the Falun Gong, that we demand that all Falun Gong practitioners and prisoners of conscience be released immediately, and that we call on China to immediately end the inhumane and unethical practice of organ harvesting. China's horrific treatment of the Falun Gong must be stopped, and we cannot allow these crimes to continue. Now, I'm very grateful to my friend in the Senate, Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, for all of his efforts to pass a similar resolution this Congress so that both the House and the Senate can be on record as condemning China's horrific behavior. Followers of the Falun Gong are peaceful. You are compassionate. You are tolerant individuals who should be respected for your beliefs. And you have a basic and fundamental human right to practice your religious beliefs without fear, without harassment, without persecution. This year, the famous organization Freedom House reported that Falun Gong practitioners are subject to widespread surveillance. The government is spying on them. They're also subject to arbitrary detention. They are rounded up and thrown in jail without any cause. They're imprisoned, they're tortured, and they are at high risk of extrajudicial execution. This peaceful movement, these practitioners are subject to extrajudicial execution. That is just incredible. And despite China's best efforts to deny the truth, to whitewash the truth, there is good reason to believe that its practice of organ harvesting continues to this day. There is unequivocally no justification for this ghoulish practice or any of the brutal repression and human rights violations. So today, we come together to raise awareness about the plight of the Falun Gong, and we recommit ourselves so that followers of the Falun Gong will finally be allowed to practice your beliefs without fear. Because right now, that is the plight of the Falun Gong. You are practicing your religion with fear of persecution. One day, I know that we will be gathered here to celebrate more than just the progress we've made. We will be celebrating freedom for all Falun Gong practitioners in China. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
And that was Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. And next we actually have Dr. T. Kumar. He is the International Advocacy Director at Amnesty International USA. Amnesty International is a global movement of millions of people demanding human rights for all people. They are the world's largest grassroots human rights organization. Actually, let's go back to Capitol Hill, where Congresswoman Ileana is accepting an award.
For your persistent efforts to support Falun Gong and help end the brutal persecution by the Chinese regime. The resolutions you initiated are instrumental to raising awareness of the persecution and exposing these heinous crimes. Thank you for letting those without a voice be heard. Come on over here. Let's take this photo. Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay, good. He's good.
And there you see Congresswoman Lehtinen accepting an award, and deservedly so, as she sponsored the first unanimously passed resolution, House Resolution 343, that basically Congress, United States Congress, has condemned the Chinese government for its persecution of Falun Gong and forced organ harvesting. As we were saying before, we now have Dr. T. Kumar, who is the director for International Advocacy Director of Amnesty International, and he is making his way to the podium to speak. And Ileana talked about a lot of things that hopefully we have some time later on to touch upon, especially she pointed out the report that we mentioned earlier that came from Freedom House. And Dr. Kumar is walking to the podium right now, and here he is.
Is pleased to join all of you today to express our concerns to the Chinese authorities as well as to the world at large that what's happening to Falun Gong practitioners in China is unacceptable, and Chinese government should stop torturing, imprisoning, killing, and abusing Falun Gong practitioners. About 18 years ago, we were surprised as people that in China, suddenly a peaceful group of people called Falun Gong was non-violently practicing some of their beliefs, and Chinese government got upset, irritated, and then they went after them in a very enormous and very brutal manner. For 18 years, we have been campaigning along with you to get an answer to that and to stop these abuses. But so far, we did not succeed. We have seen thousands imprisoned, thousands sent to psychiatric hospitals, hundreds extrajudicially executed, tortured, and other abuses that's happening for a group of people called Falun Gong, who primarily were nonviolent and peaceful practitioners of their beliefs. We have seen China moving from a very brutal dictatorship to the worst dictatorship now. We have seen a Nobel Peace Laureate recently he died in prison, not in prison, but because of Chinese ill treatment. Now we are here championing to bring his wife to freedom. His wife did not commit any crimes. The only crime she did was his wife. So what we are seeing in China is situation is getting bad to worse. But that should not stop people from shouting, working out, and campaigning for their rights. Falun Gong has been doing extremely well in that level. Today, your presence here is an example that you cannot be threatened or intimidated. 18 years have passed, but you did not stop your campaign. Some of you may have born after that. So it shows your courage and your determination to get justice and your right to freely exercise your right to freedom of expression and belief. We hope what you are doing here will bring results very soon. We are also here with the new administration, Trump administration. We hope Trump administration take this as one of the main issues when they deal with Chinese authorities. We urge U.S. Congress, both Senate and House, to use some extra pressure on the administration to raise the plight of Falun Gong in China. In closing, I would like to thank Falun Gong to invite us to be with you today to share our concern and determination to fight for the rights of Falun Gong. I thank you again for inviting, and next year, I hope if actions like you take more, we will find some good results. Thank you very much.
And that was Dr. T. Kumar for Amnesty International. Next, we have Dr. Linda Legman, who is the commissioner at the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, which is a nonprofit mental health watchdog responsible for helping to enact more than 150 laws protecting individuals from abuse of coercive practices. Here is Dr. Linda.
And the 2017 Senate resolution condemning the persecution and brutality of forced human organ harvesting of the Falun Gong in China. Citizens Commission on Human Rights, CCHR, was founded 48 years ago and is a non-political mental health watchdog and human rights group. It is the aspect of psychiatric abuse of the Falun Gong that I'm going to address today, knowing that such political psychiatric abuse has a precedent. Because of this abuse, we call on the International Criminal Court to intervene in what truly is a psychiatric crime against humanity. CCHR has documented similar abuses to those against the Falun Gong in Bosnia, Russia, South Africa, and of course Nazi Germany. In fact, 70 years after the Holocaust, the German Psychiatric Association publicly admitted to psychiatrists' pivotal role in the Holocaust. In 2010, Professor Frank Schneider, president of the German Association for Psychiatry, apologized about the organization's silence and admitted during the Nazi regime, psychiatrists had forced patients to be sterilized, arranged their deaths, and even performed killings themselves. The association also issued a report that acknowledged psychiatrists had laid the scientific foundation of the euthanasia program, guided and directed the different euthanasia campaigns, and observed and controlled the selection of those to be killed. In 1999, the same year the Falun Gong was banned in China, the role of psychiatrists as the architects of ethnic cleansing in Bosnian war in the early 1990s was exposed in a resolution issued by the Council of Europe. The United Nations International Criminal Tribunal convicted one of those psychiatrists of persecution, extermination, and murder. He used his psychiatric training to plan terror tactics for ethnic cleansing. He is a psychiatrist who is an example of clinicide, the phenomena of doctors who kill. We see the same false, quote, scientific foundation that was used in Nazi Germany used to rationalize terror tactics, torture, and clinicide of the Falun Gong in China's psychiatric hospitals. In Soviet Russia, apartheid South Africa, and Nazi Germany, that scientific foundation included inventing mental disorders to justify the illegal detainment of citizens who had committed no crime. Even here in the United States, civil rights protesters of the 1960s were labeled with protest psychosis or delusional anti-whiteness. Likewise in China, psychiatrists have invented mental disorders to justify the incarceration of Falun Gong members. Falun Gong and political dissidents are labeled as political maniacs with delusions of reform. Independent research has found that Falun Gong members are incarcerated in psychiatric custodial facilities based on these psychiatric disorders to justify their indefinite incarceration without trial. They are forcibly injected with psychotropic drugs, receive massive amounts of electroshock through acupuncture needles, endure forced sleep deprivation, and are tied up for long periods of time. A United Nations representative found Falun Gong members have died as a result of severe ill treatment, stating, quote, "The cruelty and brutality of these alleged acts of torture defy description." It was also found that over 150 Chinese hospitals are known to use torture against Falun Gong practitioners. These are unconscionable atrocities and require immediate action. The International Criminal Court can prosecute individuals who have committed genocide and crimes against humanity. It's clear from the court's statute that defines genocide and crimes against humanity that these are the very human rights abuses that the Falun Gong have suffered for decades and continue without accountability. That accountability must include those psychiatrists responsible for overseeing brutal treatment and potentially even officials with the Chinese Society of Psychiatry. There is a grave problem with the power governments grant to psychiatry to involuntarily detain and force harmful treatments on individuals. As the late Professor Thomas Szasz, the co-founder of Citizens Commission on Human Rights, said, all psychiatric treatment that is forced is a political human rights abuse. We are standing with the Falun Gong and calling on the international community to end the human rights abuses, the psychiatric human rights abuses. Thank you.
And that was Dr. Linda Legman, who brought to light a clinicide, which is, this is one of the first times that I'm hearing about it. Psychiatrists in China inventing these disorders to incarcerate practitioners without trial.
Yes, and injecting them with larger doses of psychotropic drugs to completely destroy their mind and destroy their will, and then have them sign all types of documentation denouncing their spiritual practice, and then parading them through the media as people who've been saved from this menace to society, creating all this type of propaganda just to vilify the peaceful Falun Gong in China.
Incredible, and it's important that she brings that up because, you know, as a citizen in China who does not have access to, say, NTD TV, and you only have access to it if you have satellite access, you know, a lot of the reports on Chinese state media are that Falun Gong practitioners suffer from psychiatric issues, which, as we've learned today and throughout the years, that a lot of these, and if not all of these, are invented.
Yes, these are all trumped up charges, just like we've seen throughout history. The Chinese Communist Party is using tactics both used in history and developing technologies to torture and persecute people in new ways, like organ harvesting is only a newly developed science.
Organ harvesting is a theme that nearly everyone today that you heard brought up, and actually we have a video about organ harvesting that we like to show before the end of our first hour coverage. Of course, after that, we'll be back with the second hour that is live from Washington, D.C., which is the parade that you will see going down Pennsylvania Avenue. But first, we'd like to play that video to give you more background about organ harvesting.
We call it a new form of evil on the world. It's never been done by any government in the past, to take a large group of its own people and say, we're going to kill you without any kind of a trial, and we're going to sell your vital organ parts.
Starting at the end of 1999, the number of transplants taking place just exploded.
China carries out more organ transplant surgeries than any country besides the United States. But unlike other countries, China has no effective organ donation program. Zhao Shuhuan was put in a Chinese labor camp because she practices Falun Gong.
我每到一个劳教所，他都会让我们检查身体，给我们抽血验血。每个劳教所都是。
I'm absolutely convinced that over a long period from 1999 onwards, organ harvesting from prisoners has been taking place, especially with Falun Gong.
The military is making money off of it, the hospitals are making money off of it, the middlemen are making money off of it. And we talk about money, we're talking about a multi-million-dollar operation.
Millions of Falun Gong practitioners are being persecuted in China for their beliefs. In 1999, Communist Party leader Jiang Zemin issued orders to break them financially, ruin their reputations, and destroy them physically. Since then, thousands of Falun Gong practitioners have disappeared without a trace.
Military hospitals get watched in China, okay? There is nothing they can do without the party central taking note of what they're doing. Was this run by triads? No. This is run by the state. This was murder, and it came from the state.
In 2006, 2 Canadians started to investigate allegations of forced organ harvesting in China. They found at least 52 points of circumstantial evidence, including websites of Chinese hospitals offering matching organs in less than a week.
It's just not possible unless you have an unlimited source of organs. And these are people who are alive. We're talking about live donors. The actual transplant surgery itself was the form of execution. These were living people that were killed for their organs.
2017 World Falun Dafa Day, New York Parade.
And now I have a proclamation or letter from Senator Marco Rubio, who is a senator from Florida, and we will conclude with this short reading of his letter. Marco Rubio says, "To those who have gathered at the U.S. Capitol to draw attention to the Chinese Communist Party's campaign against the Falun Gong, thank you. As you well know, the Chinese government and Communist Party officials continue to systematically and even violently pressure Falun Gong practitioners to renounce their beliefs and stop practicing their faith. I was pleased to join with Senator Menendez last week in introducing a Senate resolution expressing solidarity with Falun Gong practitioners and condemning the practice of non-consenting organ harvesting." He concludes, ultimately, China can never be a responsible global stakeholder as long as it persists in subjecting its own people to abuse, torture, and repression, and continues to deny them basic human rights. I commend you for drawing attention to this issue and stand with you in shining a bright light on this grave injustice. And with that, we'd like to thank all of you today who watched the first half of our broadcast of the July 20th Falun Gong Rally for Freedom live from Washington, D.C. When we come back in less than half an hour or so, my guest and I, Zen and Dolnicki, we will be commenting on a march that will be taking place from Capitol Hill, going down Pennsylvania Avenue and ending at the Washington Monument. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll be back in less than 30 minutes. Stay tuned.